Keep it going.
Yeah, since before you mentioned, because people they haven't experienced this pure consciousness, and many were taught or have grasping on methods, so they want to practice something to recognize the pure consciousness.
Yeah, I know.
So, and there's no fault for them because that's what they need.
That's right.
I mean, and until they reach to exhaustion, feel there's no way to achieve that, they come to ultimate.
That's right. I agree. You see, pure consciousness enlightenment can be realized in any way. I mean, it can be realized by falling down in the street. You don't need a particular practice. And so, you know, I would say that there's nothing wrong with doing practices. It's just not going to actually get you there. Tell me the question again.
You know, I'm just wondering, people they cannot recognize this pure consciousness, and they cannot just stay in this current moment.
I was going to say that pure consciousness is not actually experienced, which is why it cannot be described. You know, I would even hesitate to say that it's a state. It is something beyond the mind, which is why it can't be described. So it is not actually experienced any more than death itself is an experience. It isn't. Nobody actually experiences death. You can experience dying, but you can't actually experience death. And you cannot actually, you know, experience pure consciousness, because what happens is this self, this me, this I, falls away, and pure consciousness is there. And so the self, the me, the I, does not experience pure consciousness. You know, I'm not sure how, you know, as I said before, it can't be described in words. And so this is very difficult to understand, that pure consciousness cannot be experienced, because like death, the self disappears. The self includes, of course, you know, the mind, and so you become aware of pure consciousness, but it's not an experience. So you know, there's nothing you can actually do to actually produce this. In other words, all the practices and all the methods and all the paths themselves will not do it. Now, if you do these things, methods and practices, you know, and paths, long enough and hard enough, you know, until it wears you out completely, there will come a time when you recognize that you're not getting anywhere. And people, you know, obviously follow these paths for years and years and years. And this is why I said before that there's a great hidden sadness in the hearts of people. Even those who are finding their practices totally joyful, there is a great inner sadness that they keep suppressed, because they feel that it could ruin their spiritual progress. And this inner sadness comes from the heart. See, the heart is not the mind. The mind knows many things. It can do many things. The heart is different, and the heart knows. You know, I would say there's not a lot of difference between the heart and pure consciousness, between the heart and enlightenment. And so, what we're doing, we are using the mind, using our intellectual mind to try and understand something which cannot be understood, in order to gain something which cannot be gained by the intellectual mind. It's only when the intellectual mind is dropped, when this self is dropped, when it's seen to be non-existent, that pure consciousness and enlightenment is there. And so, you know, I would say I'm not against practices, I'm not against methods or paths. All I'm saying is they are leading you in the wrong direction. Now, when you come to realize that, you will stop doing it. You know, this is not deceit on the part of spiritual teachers or gurus. You know, it is largely ignorance, and ignorance therefore is passed on to their disciples, their devotees, and so you can follow all the paths. I mean, you know thousands of people have been practicing all their lives, and they may be enjoying their practices and think it's a very wonderful thing, but they're not enlightened, because they haven't seen that enlightenment is already theirs. They are trying to look for, gain something that they already have. They're looking in the wrong place. And so all of these efforts, with this intellectual mind, with itself, is leading you away from enlightenment, from pure consciousness, which is here. Here it is. It's nowhere else.
Yeah, I feel I understand what you're saying because I got some glimpse. I was in one teaching. Then we were after the teaching. I was in meditation. And that time was the teacher instructed us to do a little meditation. And I did not get from words. But during the meditation, which is absent of the mind, and I see my own vision, that my concept just coincide with the appearances. It just, and that wasn't any mind interfere there. So I recognize this, and for many time I have this kind of glimpse, simultaneous recognition, the illusory nature projected from the mind with a vision. So I trust what you said. And you are talking about the ultimate meaning of this pathless path, and regardless any path that you are practicing. But this is important.
You see, when people kind of discuss this with me and comment negatively about what I'm saying, I will say that yes, the mind can take you so far, and then it has to be dropped. If you never come to that point where it is dropped, you'll never come to enlightenment. I'm sorry, you'll never come to a realization of pure consciousness. So the mind can take you so far. Now the question is, how long is it going to take you to realize this? I often speak to Buddhists or those who claim to know Dharma, and they don't seem to understand that this is the kind of experience that Buddha had. That all his suffering, self-inflicted torture, whipping, starving himself in the forest with devotees, ended in failure. And you see, when he decided that this was not the path, this was not working, and left, his devotees hated him. Every single one left him. The Buddha was so tired and so exhausted by all his efforts over several years, trying many different things, some of them very severe. He finally gave up. He sat under a tree. It happened to be a Bodhi tree. The Bodhi tree is not sacred, not special. It was an ordinary tree. Then it became, of course, special. When Buddha sat underneath it and became enlightened. But he became enlightened because he dropped it all. Not because he was doing things in the forest, not because he was starving himself, not because he was whipping himself, not because he was he had devotees who were doing the same thing. Enlightenment, he saw, pure consciousness, he became aware of because he stopped. He gave up. How long will it take you to come to that point, to give up?
Many years.
And so if this is the case with Buddha, and he said there is no self, no attachment to self, there is no self, if he can't do anything else, why don't you just believe what he says? Why don't you just take his word for it and let it go? He's already trod the path. He's already told you, what it is. It's a pathless path. It's already here. It's already ours. You let it go. And he tells you to let it go. You don't need to spend your time in the forest whipping yourself and starving yourself, or any of the modern practices we do today. But you do need to do them in order to get to the point to see that they are fruitless. So yes, when people say, I am trying to stop people doing practice, I am not trying to stop people doing practice or following methods or following a path. I'm saying do it. Do it until you get to the point where you realize you've been wasting your time. And the only way that you're going to realize who you are, pure consciousness, an enlightened being, is to do what Buddha did. Sit down. Be quiet. Be still. And drop it.
Yes, even I'm here following you. You know, each day I'm just doing what I need to do, and I don't interfere my mind. Just keep doing, you know, and that's what I do.
See, I find this so simple, you know, because it happened to me. You know, there was a time when I was very young when it hadn't happened to me, and I was trying to, you know, read as much as I could and follow Buddhist teachings as carefully as I could, even at a very young age. And there's nothing wrong with them, you know. But one day, through something similar to Buddha, you know, if you like, being traumatized by my situation of being a Western boy in Tibet, freezing cold, with monks who were not very kind, in fact they were cruel, to be honest with you, totally traumatized. But you see, this is the way that pure consciousness was leading me. And one day I was so totally traumatized by my experiences in Tibet, up to the age of 7, that instead of having a nervous breakdown, instead of going crazy, which some monks have, this idea of me being a separate individual, a self, simply fell away. I mean, I was only 7 years old, and so it hadn't really developed as strongly in me as it would in someone who was 30 or 40 or 50. And so in that sense, it was easier. But it still had to be dropped. I could have missed that point, and I could have still been practicing and following paths and methods today at 71 years old. And I still wouldn't be any closer to pure consciousness, being aware of that I am pure consciousness and enlightened. But it happened when I was 7. So what I'm saying is this, you know, don't spend, you know, one day more, if you can help it, struggling with this. You know, recognize what Buddha said. You know, recognize the fact that it's impossible to be enlightened by the intellectual mind, because that has to drop, that has to go. You have to see that the self that you imagine yourself to be is really an illusion. I mean, this is so simple. This is so simple. But it comes from the heart, you see. It doesn't come from the intellectual mind. The intellectual mind will not understand it, will not accept it, and will want to continue to do these things. And so, you know, you have to really step back. You know, you really have to sit down. You really have to be still. And you really have to stop doing all these things. But you can only do that when you're absolutely tired of it. You can't decide, I'm going to stop now. You know, you will stop when you're absolutely tired, you know, worn out and exhausted, and then it will drop on its own. And you know what? The minute it drops on its own, you will realize that there was nothing you could do about it. You are enlightened, you always have been enlightened, you are pure consciousness. And that's the end of the story.